Chad here with Savage Camper. Hope you're doing well. This is part 3 of my camping unit build for my Jeep Renegade. I have the camping unit set up here currently on my kitchen table. Just a quick recap, if this is the first time you're seeing this camping unit I'm building. In part 1, I built this slide out counter, which will be used for a stove and other items. I built the slide out sink and built this platform for this water jug that I purchased off Amazon, which will provide water for the sink. I also, in part 2, built out the storage back here in the rear, which will be storage for the future stove. And I built out the slide out fridge freezer. I mentioned in prior videos that this space is going to be reserved for the off-grid power systems that I plan to incorporate into this camping unit. The first part of that is this AGM battery. It's a 50 amp hour battery made by Mighty Max that I purchased off Amazon for about $100. If you're not familiar with AGM batteries, they're commonly used in overland builds. They're a lead-based battery. They're sealed battery, so that means that they don't off-gas like your typical lead-based wet cell battery. And they can take being jarred around, so they're great for off-road applications. This battery weighs 30 pounds, and I plan to store it in the rear of the power system space here, because it'll act as a great counterweight to the slide out fridge or weight on the countertop here. I plan to coat this in here with plastic or some other material just in case there's any sparks. I don't want the wood to catch on fire. My Renegade has a 12-volt socket in the rear, so I can power the fridge freezer unit off of it when I'm driving around. However, when I'm parked, I don't want to continually draw off the Renegade's battery, so that's what I have this battery for. It's going to power this fridge freezer unit when I'm camping. This fridge freezer unit draws a max of 3.75 amps. At room temperature, it draws about half an amp an hour. So again, this is a 50 amp hour battery, 12 volt. I plan to recharge this battery off of solar power when I'm camping. Besides the fridge freezer unit needing power, the other thing I plan to incorporate is the switch panel, which I purchased off Amazon. Many people have probably seen these before, but basically it has an on-off switch, a digital LED voltage meter. You have 2 USB ports, and you'll have a 12-volt socket, which I can plug the fridge freezer into. I think I'll be incorporating it somewhere around here. I don't know quite yet. So now that I've showed you the basic layout of the power systems in the camping unit, I actually wanted to go through the whole build out of the electrical systems. It's very simple, but it's a complete off-grid system. So it might be useful for those of you who are trying to learn yourself and build your own system. So let's start with the solar panel. This is a Renogy solar panel. It's a suitcase fold-out panel. This unit is actually 60 watts, 230 watt panels. I actually purchased the very last one I believe that they were selling on Amazon, at least for the time being, 60 watts. Renogy does sell 100 watt suitcase systems and above, but the reason why I went with this is because of the compact size. I really needed something small. I plan to incorporate this in storage within the camping unit, as I'll show you in future video. So if you open this up, you can see that it has these brackets here. They fold out so this thing will stand at an angle. The reason why I went with this as well is because I didn't want to mount a solar panel on the top of my Renegade for a couple reasons. First off, if you have to set your vehicle in the sun to charge when camping, that's counterproductive for the fridge freezer keeping cool. I want to park in the shade. So what this allows me to do is run a line out and just follow the sun, maybe within a 10-15 foot radius. I can place this out in the sun and get a charge, and yet park my Renegade in the shade. The other reason is for security. I wanted my Renegade to not have any indication that there's an off-grid camping unit in it from the outside. So if someone was walking by and they could see a solar panel mounted on the top, that would be a clue like, whoa, there's probably some expensive equipment in there. Maybe I want to break in and take it. So I plan to have this thing totally stealth off-grid camping. And here's a solar panel set up. You can see how it sets up. So when I had purchased this off Amazon, it was a great deal. It was $99. It came in that nice suitcase you saw. And it was also supposed to come with a 10 amp solar charge controller and also a wiring harness with the leads to run it from the controller to a battery. And neither of those were included. It looked like someone had taken the charge controller. So I contacted Amazon and they gave me a credit, and I went ahead and purchased a Renogy 10 amp charge controller, which you can see here. And I think I am going to mount this on the panel here. I also contacted Renogy, and they went ahead and made a wiring harness for me and sent it right out, which you can see here. It has battery clips. These are, if you're not familiar, these are MC4 connectors. And it also has a fuse. And in this is a blade fuse, 10 amps. So now that I pieced together the 10 amp solar charge controller and the wiring harness, we've got these MC4 connectors here. If you look at the solar charge controller, this is where the solar panel plugs in, the line from the solar panel to the charge controller. This is where the line goes from the charge controller to the battery, and then this is just an accessory if you want to run power straight from your charge controller. There's also 2 USB ports, and I believe this is a port where you can attach a Bluetooth device and control this from your phone. I don't need that. But you can see I run into an issue here where I have these MC4 connectors. I can't plug those into the charge controller, and same with the wiring harness. I have a problem with that as well. I don't want to waste these MC4 connectors. They're really nice. So what I did is I went ahead and purchased some extra Renogy MC4 connectors. You can get these on Amazon. And squeeze out. Here's basically the raw connector, which I'll need to crimp onto wire, and then these slip over the ends. I also purchased an MC4 connector tool, which you can also get on Amazon, and this allows you to put them together with the tool, like so. I forgot to mention that these are set screws in here, and they accept the bare wire. So that's why I'll be running out from the charge controller a short positive and negative wire that lead to an MC4 connector from both the solar panel and the battery inputs here. And that way I can plug in the panel into that connector from the charge controller, and same with the battery. I'm going to take you through building all of this so it'll be easier to see coming up. In this whole system, there's going to be nothing that exceeds 10 amps. The wiring harness I received has the 10 amp fuse. This is a 10 amp solar charge controller. This is 14 gauge wire, which is good enough for 15 amps. For my wiring, I went ahead and purchased from Home Depot some 16 gauge wire, which is good enough for 10 amps. strip these wires. I went ahead and crimped the first connector on. What I didn't realize, and I kind of got lucky, is that there's a male and a female. They go together like this. And it looks like that the male is in here, and then I have a female here. It's like a rubberized seal. Looks like it tightens down, and when you screw the cap on, it creates like a watertight seal. Pretty cool. So let's put this cap on. This is my first time doing this, so bear with me. Alright. Fits nice and snug in there. It just clicked in. I imagine that means it's set. Put that seal on. Screw the cap on here. And let's grab our MC4 connector tool. Snug it down, and voila, looks like I have a connector. It plugs in, snaps like that, and now I have, whoops, kind of messed up that bare wire. Now I have a lead from the wiring harness here, the positive, that will go. So this is going to go to the battery, this wiring harness. So this will feed into this terminal here. I've got to get a little screwdriver so that I can wire that in. So I'm going to make a negative for this, and then another set for the solar panel. So I'll have 4 of these hanging out of the solar charge controller. There we go. So now we have lines out for the solar panel and the battery with MC4 connectors. All right, now moving on to the wiring of the switch panel. Again, we have the switch, we have an LED readout. We have 2 USB ports. These are 5 volts, 2.1 amps max each. So that means 4.2 amps total from this. And then we have this 12 volt socket. The whole system, as I mentioned, is going to be 10 amps. So with 4.2 amps here, we're looking at 5 amps max through this 12 volt socket. So I'm probably going to label this. That way there's no confusion. From what I've seen online, these are typically gang wired, where you go from, this is the positive and the negative, positive to positive to positive to positive in here, and then same with the negatives. Now in the switch there's 3 terminals and they're not labeled. So because these are not labeled, I can see one of them's colored like a brass color and the other 2 are chrome. And on these, the negative terminals are brass colored. So I'm assuming that that is the negative on the switch. And then because there's three positive terminals linked to one of these, and then a positive goes out for power to the battery. The wiring that came with this I believe is made in China. And from what I've seen, other people have had this issue as well, where the wiring that comes with it doesn't even match what you're supposed to do with wiring this. So you can see here you have a spade connector here, which is fine. And then it has a little regular 10 amp, mini 10 amp fuse in this, and then it leads out to this ring connector, which doesn't make sense at all. So I'm gonna have to use these wires to make my gang wiring. And then they have some connectors in here at least. So I have some spade connectors here, and I'll use all of this to properly wire this. And this is all gonna go out to, as I said, power to the battery, but I need to make sure this is fused. So this is gonna be 10 amp system. You've got 4.2 amps, 5 amps, that gives you 9.2 amps. That gives me a little bit of extra room that I'll run out power through. I purchased this from my local automotive store. You can get this on Amazon too. This fuse holder is the same as on the wiring harness for the solar panel. Holds a blade fuse, same kind that the solar panel uses. And I purchased a set of 10 amp fuse for this and backup as well. So that way the same type of fuse is used in this as it is with the solar panel wiring harness. I also purchased some battery clips. These are 10 amp battery clips, which will be the end from this panel to the battery, where I can clip it on to the battery. Here's the positive terminals all wired up. I found the spade connectors that came with this to be junk, so I went and bought some better quality ones from Home Depot. This line will run out to the fuse and then onto the battery. Now here's the negative wiring completed for the switch panel. Left this last connection off. You can see I have to combine the wire here from the last terminal, which will go out to the battery, versus these positives being separate because there's two terminals. I imagine that has to do with the switch cutting the power. So this will go out to the battery negative terminal. This will go through the fuse and then onto the positive terminal of the battery. All right, I just finished up all the wiring connections. So from the positive line here, we have the fuse, inline 10 amp fuse, out to a alligator clip for the positive battery terminal, and then a line for the negative with a clip to the negative terminal on the battery. So I went ahead and set the battery up in the camping unit here on my table so you get a little bit better visualization. And this is my first time connecting it, so let's see if this all works. Let's hook up the negative. And hook up the positive. There, like so. Oh yeah, it's working. It's alive. Awesome. So this is going to probably sit somewhere in here. And I'll clean up this wiring. I obviously have some extra wiring here. This is a great example of a basic setup of your switch panel, gang wired, fused, and out to your battery. All right, I went ahead and plugged in the 12 volt power for the fridge freezer unit. As you can see, it's running 12.9 volts. It's on eco mode, low battery protection mode. Anyway, it works. And the fridge freezer just kicked on right now, so you can hear it's pretty quiet. Okay, just finished up the basic wiring in the camping unit for the 12-volt solar powered off-grid system. Switch panel is running. You can see it's generating 13.6 volts currently. Here's the wiring in the rear. 50 amp hour AGM battery. I went ahead and built this panel offline. You can see how I did it. Drilled some holes and ran the switches through it. And then I notched the panel down here for the line out to the solar panel. This panel will actually slide in and out, and the reason why I did that is so that I could slide out the battery easily when I want to take it out. Over here on the solar panel, you can see the Renogy charge controller generating 14.5 volts currently. Here's all the MC4 connectors that I wired up. Everything's working great. Coming up in part 4 of the off-grid camping unit build, I have a lot of finish work to do. I plan to carpet some of this wood and coat some of it with other materials. I also plan to come up with a good mount for the battery so that it doesn't slide around, and clean up some of this wiring. I need to finish the storage space. I need to finish up the drain for the sink. I also need to come up with a lid for this camping unit and lots of other little things. So stay tuned for part 4 of the off-grid camping unit build for my Jeep Renegade.